What's up guys? Welcome back to The Inverse Engineer. I'm Tariq Nasser, and today I'm going to be showing you how to level bids and pick your contractor. If you're in the process of home improvement or a home renovation, you guys know how critical it is to choose the right contractor. The right contractor can make or break a project. In this video, I'll walk you through how to level bids and make sure you pick the right contractor for your project. Let's jump in. Step 1. The first step is to clearly define your project. While this may be hard to do right off the bat, it's really important that you walk your project, you write down a list of scope of work, and you identify everything that needs to be done on the project. What I typically do is walk the site or the project and make a list as I walk. I then schedule walks with each contractor and I review the list with them. During this process, sometimes they're giving me new ideas or concepts that I can take and add to my list. After this, I have my scope of work developed and I make sure each contractor is working and bidding off of that scope. Now I'm going to show you the actual process on how to level bids. This can be done on the back of a napkin, pieces of paper, but I like to do it in spreadsheets. The purpose of leveling bids is to make sure things are apples to apples. That's a term that you hear quite a bit in the construction industry. That term means you just want to make sure you're comparing one thing similarly to another thing. For example, if contractor A is telling you he's going to install flooring for a certain price, but contractor B is telling you he's going to install flooring and baseboard for another price, those are not apples to apples. That's apples to oranges. So then you would go back to contractor A and say, by the way, can you include baseboard in your price? And therefore, you're comparing two similar prices for the same scope of work. Now let's jump in and I can show you how it's done. All right guys, well here is a version of a bid leveling sheet I use many different versions. I sometimes evolve one many different iterations over, or sometimes I keep it simple and just start from scratch. As I mentioned, it doesn't matter what you use as long as you still do the same process. Some people like to have all these fancy formulas and fancy spreadsheets. Sometimes I get carried away with that, and sometimes I keep it simple. At the end of the day, the tool is the same, how you use it is the same, and you just need to use something that works for you. So I'll walk you through quickly how I do my sheets, then I'll go about the process, and then you could take that mentality and apply it for yourself. Here's the name of my company, here's the scope of work, here's the property address, and then here's the square footage and bedroom count, bathroom count. So what I do is I go down, I create a couple of different columns. I have the item number, the category, a description of it, any notes that pertain to it, quantity, the units of that quantity, and then subtotals. And I'll get to that in a minute. A lot of people have different opinions on how to set up the sheet. I like to do it somewhat by categories, but also more importantly by rooms, because every room may need something different, and therefore I could go room by room, identify what that needs to be, and then I have the categories of the different work in that room, and therefore I know I'm capturing everything that needs to be done in a specific room within the property. And then ultimately I can also use this as a checklist when I'm trying to have people get paid. If I choose this contractor, we want to walk the work, I could go use it as a checklist. He could use it as a checklist. He could take this list and walk the property and go room by room to make sure he understands the scope. Sometimes I don't have the availability to walk with each contractor, so I'll walk with many as possible, but sometimes I'll give them the lockbox combination and they'll be able to go on the property, walk the list themselves, and then identify the price. So for this specific property, I went ahead and first I did the category of demo cleanup, and I kind of talked about like the overall level, what we need to do on each level and what room it pertains to, and then a description of what we need to do. So just choosing one, for example, item number 6 is level 1 cleanup and demo. This was specific to the family room, and I described it's next to the kitchen, and I wanted them to make sure they remove the level 1 family room fireplace. There's a fake mantle there. The wallpaper, fake plaster. You want to skim coat if the fake plaster is hard to remove, and also remove the track light fixture. In this specific property, I didn't want to go demo the whole thing. I wanted to be strategic on what to keep, what to demo. So this list helped them know that I wanted to have a strategic demo. Going down the list, I have a category of rough-in. This is kind of like all the new ads that's getting roughed into the house, whether it be plumbing, electrical, or HVAC, and then a description. So now let's just choose number 13 to understand. I'm saying that, we're going to do HVAC rough-in. We're going to replace the existing condensers. We're going to replace 2 existing condensers, relocate to the right side of the house on the pads. It needs to be installed appropriately for weather conditions. So I'm trying to describe to them that, they need to account for everything that they need to do to properly do this work. So then I go down and now I go into the interior finishes. And now this is room by room. Basically, I go down and I generate my full list. I put a disclaimer down at the bottom that I'm not responsible for the final quantities. It's up to them to double check, so they can't come back and hold it against me as I'm trying to help them out. And at the end of the day, they owe the responsibility of measuring and make sure they account for the proper quantities. After I go down and create my list, I then walk with the contractors as I suggested to walk the list line by line. And sometimes the contractors are suggesting to do other things that may be better than my original ideas and should help drive down cost. Sometimes those contractors are suggesting to do the wrong things, and therefore it raises flags if this is even the right partner for me to go with. Once I have a full refined scope of work, you can see that this is pretty comprehensive for this property. There's a lot to be done here. So, basically if I count, the number of items here, there's about 200 different line items. So there's quite a bit. I'm pretty specific. Some people would say this is kind of too much detail. The GCs I work for actually appreciate this detail. But I honestly want to do this for 2 things. One, I want to make sure I have the scope of work covered. And then when I contract somebody, I have them sign this document. There's no arguments of who owes what. It's clearly defined. And the next important piece is I use this after I create the list to come up with my estimate. The most important columns here is my labor column and my material column. So I go down and I write how much I think the labor should be or the material should be. So essentially I go down and I use my best judgment, my experience on how to come up with these unit costs. At the end of the day, when I'm done with this, I have it tally up at the top. It tells me what my total labor should be for the scope of work, what the total material cost should be for the scope of work, and gives me my total. So this is my total cost for this specific project of what I assumed it should be. Now I don't give obviously my takeoffs and my estimate, I should say, to the contractors, as I don't want them to know how much I think it should cost. They always ask you most of the time, like, so what's your budget? Never give them your budget. If you give them your budget, they're going to come back miraculously with their bid very close to your budget. Just say, at the end of the day, I'm competitively bidding this. Whoever comes up with the best price, the best quality, the best references, the best photos, I'm going to award that job to them. So essentially, I just kind of hide this data here. I just give them the scope of work, which is, again, the quantity, the units. I allow them to go through and give me prices. Then as I get the prices back, I put them here on this side of the spreadsheet. I hid the contractor's name for respect. I don't want people to know who I went out on this project. So some contractors are detailed and want to give you a breakdown of the line items. Some of them are lazy and just say it's going to take, for all this, it's going to take $40,000 worth of labor. That is not the sign of somebody you really want to work with. That means they're just kind of taking the list and throwing a best number to it, and they're not really following your directions. Those who go down, and of course it's a lot of work to give them a line by line item, but you could have them give it to me in chunks. So for example, contractor A, okay, well just tell me how much it's going to cost you to demo. Usually you can get it in that fashion. So what I go do is I go down the list and I basically start plugging the numbers, what's included versus what's excluded. For things that are excluded, I have another column that I say work by others. That means I have to still get that scope of work covered by somebody else. And for the value I'm using, that is my estimate. So I'm saying, okay, if I could get it done for my estimate, I'm going to have to if I go with this contractor, number 4, he's not going to want to shampoo the carpet. So I'm going to have to carry that cost by somebody else. So at the end of the day, I go down, I say what's included versus what's excluded, and then I get what their total labor should be, what the material should be. The material cost is something that I'm usually bringing over because I like to pay for material on my projects. I like to only pay for labor. I like to pay for material because I control the material. I get discounts on the material. If you have credit cards, you get points for buying that material. You could create accounts with different suppliers and develop relationships for future projects to get discounts on your material. Sometimes they also include material on some things, so then you can make a note what's included versus not. At the end of the day, what you do is you do your best. You go through, you level, you call them back, you say, by the way, I noticed that you did not include this, but can you include A, B, C, and D? This other guy is. And you use this to kind of negotiate and try to understand where the fair price should be. In construction, things will go wrong, unforeseens will happen. People will make mistakes, they'll argue about the cost, and you don't really want to be going with somebody that's exactly tight to your budget. There's no room for error, and it's going to be a fight the whole way through. It takes a couple of iterations to go through this. It took me about a month to come to an agreement of who I wanted to choose. It took about 1 weekend to walk with about 4 or 5 different guys. Now we're in construction. Some of these videos will be coming out where I'm walking through the progress of the construction. Things seem to be going very well. And at the end of the day, bid leveling, it's not really an exact science. It's for you to see everything on one page, try to see where everything is at, to try to make the best decision moving forward. Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to make a decision, move on with your life, and not always go back and like, well, did I choose the right guy? Did I go through the right process? After putting a lot of time and effort I feel I made the best choice at the time, and now I'm living with it, and ideally it turns out well. And there you have it, the ultimate guide to help you level bids and pick the right contractor for your project. Remember, through research and careful consideration, it will help you select the right contractor to hopefully lead to a stress-free project. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, or give a thumbs up. Also, please comment down below if there's any other things you would like me to walk you through to make sure you understand the process to make sure you choose the right contractor for your projects.